This episode is proudly sponsored by HASA, the trusted choice for liquid chlorine. It's better because it offers the highest purity, works instantly, and contains no added CYA. By the bottom feeder, professional-grade battery-powered swimming pool vacuum system, it sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off the bottom feeder with code DVB100. Skimmer, trusted by over 30,000 pool service professionals across North America. Skimmer software helps you save time, grow revenue, and boost your 5-star reviews. Whether you're just starting out or expanding your team, Skimmer's easy-to-use tools and expert support have you covered. Upgrade your business in 2025 with Skimmer. Try Skimmer for 30 days for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to go over the various manufactured salt systems. I'm going to talk about some things that over the years I've noticed being problems with these systems. Of course, every system kind of has a run of issues at one point or another, and then the manufacturer corrects them. And I'll go over things that I've noticed with the Jandy, Pentair, and Hayward salt systems, as well as any off-brand systems out there. Join my coaching program and take your pool service to the next level. Connect with other pool pros in your area, gain valuable knowledge, and transform your business with personalized one-on-one advice from me. With over 36 years of experience, I'm here to help you succeed like never before. Learn more at poolguycoaching.com. And as I mentioned, a lot of these problems have been addressed by the manufacturer. They're not really ongoing issues in most cases, but there are issues that do pop up and happen from time to time with these systems, and this is kind of why I did this, so I can kind of unpack all these major systems for you and the things I've noticed over the years on my route when I have one of these in the backyard. A lot of builders, of course, get equipment packages, and so a lot of Pentair equipment in California has a Pentair salt cell. Whether you like those or not, it's a kind of a pool guy case-by-case thing. Some guys like them, some guys don't like them. I tolerate the Pentair salt cells. I think they're okay. They're not the greatest in my opinion, but they're not terrible by any stretch. Of course, they've had their run of defects with bad flow sensors. I've had a few IntelliChlors with the cell plates that cracked. Not very common, but I've had that happen. And then there's the arching issue. When there's a lot of calcium buildup on the plates, the electricity will arch and pop the fuse that's in the control center. So those are common defects with the Pentair salt cells that I've run into. A couple more issues is I've had a few cells where it says the cell is flashing, the cell is dirty, needs to be cleaned. There's really nothing on the cell plates. There's no calcium buildup. And then I'll just give it a light acid bath, put it back in, and still it flashes that it's not clean. So that's one thing I've had with a few cells. My guess is they were kind of near the end of their lifespan probably. And then the white flakes that get blown back into the pool. Pentair cells seem to have a lot of trouble with that or cause a lot of the white flakes that are blown back into the pool. So they're good, and a lot of builders put them in, so you have to live with them. Would I recommend the Pentair cell to someone buying a pool? It just depends on the pool size and their needs. I would say that the IntelliChlor cell is still preferred over the iChlor. Even though the iChlor is a higher tech and newer, the IntelliChlor are bigger and you can get a larger cell. So I kind of gravitate towards those. I like the Jandy TruClear salt cell. It's rated for 33,000 gallons. It has a clear top, and it's pretty basic. There's not a lot to the control panel. It doesn't really even do salinity or the salt level of the pool. I should mention that the Pentair salt cell, depending if you have it connected to automation, the IntelliChlor will tell you the salinity level. The iChlor will have a salinity level displayed on there. Is it a big deal not having the salinity level? I think it is a factor. If you're buying a saltwater system, you want to know what level the salt is at. And if the system doesn't tell you, you have to buy a separate meter. For the TruClear, it's not a deal breaker because the salt cell itself and the system is really solid. Yes, they've had their defects. They've had some units where the glass, or not the glass, it's like a plastic, the clear plastic lid was leaking. That happened for some of them right where the cord goes in. And they've also had some premature deaths with the salt cell dying within like a year and a half. But they do have a warranty that covers that in most cases. And so you can get a new salt cell if that were to, expire prematurely. Other than that, they've been really solid. And I like the clear top where you can see the calcium on the plates. And they work great. I really have no issues with any kind of flow sensor or anything. It's just those two issues that they've had in the past, the leaking from the top and the premature cell death, which was generally covered under their warranty. I don't think that's a current issue at this point, but if you do have a problem with it, they will warranty it. It's a great system. I really recommend it. They have a retrofit kit if you have an AquaPure salt cell and you want to replace it with this. I guess the only knock that I've heard is that the power unit is just gigantic. I'm not sure why it's so big, but it's like it has a big footprint. So if you mount it to the wall of your equipment pad, it's going to take up a big space. Not, again, a deal breaker. So that's a good system. Another competitor of both of these would be Hayward. The Aquarite salt system has been around forever. In fact, it is the number one selling salt system out there, I think, by numbers. So the Aquarite systems are really popular. Problems I've had with these have been basically the salinity reading being off. It tends to be when the salt cell starts to die that it shows you a lower salt level than what it actually is. And I've taken over many service accounts where the Aquarite system was displaying, salinity of 2600, flashing low salt, and then the person or homeowner or pool pro just added more salt, and then it's fine. It's at 3100 parts per million of salt, and then 2 weeks later it's back to 2400, and then they add more salt, and then it's back to 2300 or 2500, they add more salt. So when I do take over the account and change the salt cell out, because that's a good indicator that the salt cell is just dying. There's other indicators. If you go through the menu, there's a voltage indicator as well, but this is something that I've run into where I take over the account, change the salt cell, and then the salt reading is like 6,000 or whatever. It doesn't go that high, quite that high, but it's like reading high salt, and you can't really tell how much salt's in the pool until you take a digital probe or digital salt meter and test it. And invariably when I test it, the salt level is like at 6,000 or 7,000 parts per million. I think the highest I've ever tested was like the salt meter couldn't read it. I mean, they were just putting tons of salt in. So that is an issue with the Hayward when they start to go bad. I mentioned in the last podcast talking about troubleshooting that the Aquarite system, every 3 months, it's going to give you a flashing light. Was it orange light or yellowish light? A flashing light, I guess it's reddish, a flashing light indicating that the salt system is, the salt cell is dirty, when it's really not. It just does that all the time. And then you got to hold the little tiny black reset button, which by the way is kind of old school. Hold that little tiny black button down, and basically that will reset the system, and that'll kind of turn that indicator off for 3 more months. Whether the cell is dirty or not at that point. Usually it's not, sometimes it is, but that's just them so that you remind it every 3 months to check the cell and clean it. I guess another problem is with their flow meter. Now this is something that is interesting, and I've even had new builds with this problem where you're getting a no flow flashing light saying that there's no flow, but the pool's on and it's flowing well, and you look around for the problem and you see the little sensor, this little black hexagon type sensor that's in the plumbing, and you're looking at it and there's a tiny little, indecipherable arrow on there, and that arrow has to be pointed towards the return for it to work properly. I know it's really weird and it's kind of under engineered at this point. It should be, if I was designing this flow sensor, I would actually design it in the shape of an arrow. That makes more sense in that way, or just make the arrow a different color on top, something to indicate that this arrow needs to be pointed towards the return for this thing to operate. And I've had rodents chew the flow sensor wire. It's kind of just dangling there, and they kind of like to chew stuff, so they chew that flow sensor wire off. I've had gardeners break the flow sensor wire while they're cleaning the weeds around the equipment area. It's really fragile and sensitive, so just be aware that the Hayward flow sensor can cause issues and indicate no flow when there's actually flow going to the pool. And there are several off-brand salt systems out there. I guess I should touch on the AquaPure. There was a lot of problems back in the mid-2000s with the AquaPure systems. I mean, if I'm going to go that far back, I could talk about the Ecomatic systems, which I don't think they're around anymore. They were, I think, from Australia. These were pretty horrible salt systems with a clear cell. I believe they're still around under a different brand, actually, but they had nothing but issues, and I don't want to go into that because it's kind of a dead system. But the AquaPure system also by Jandy had problems because it was way over engineered. It had a power center with 2 circuit boards for whatever reason, and you would always have these errors with the system. So that one, I think they've repaired that and fixed that and simplified that particular operating system. So those are pretty solid now, but they had a history of being really poor salt cells in the past. Some of the ones that I guess are off-brand would be the Circuit Pool, which I think is a solid salt cell, by the way, and it really works well even in cold water, which is pretty amazing. I've only had one issue with that, and that was with something with the power center having a bad component, and they'll send you out a component or a new power center if that were to happen. But it's a pretty solid brand. If you look at the reviews, the Circuit Pool cells get really good reviews, and they're really made really well. And I do like the clear casing, and I really don't have any other issues with that particular brand. I believe they have the same footprint as the Hayward Aquarite cell, so you can swap that out pretty easily if you have a Hayward system and you're tired of it. Just get the Circuit Pool one, and that's perfectly fine. And then, of course, custom molded products. CMP had a really great salt cell. It's still out there, but it's really not marketed anymore. Actually, Florida Jandy purchased CMP, I'm going to say 3-4 years ago, and then they kind of silently put that cell under the radar. But it's still a good system. It's a custom molded product, CMP. It's called the Power Clean Salt System. It's really cool because you can use this plastic tool that looks almost like a paint stirrer to clean the salt cell plates without having to put it in an acid bath, which is kind of nice. And it has a clear casing. Now, they did have some problems with that clear casing leaking where the power cord is coming out of the salt cell. I believe they fixed that problem, so that's not an issue. They're pretty bulletproof too as far as their power units and the salt cell itself. If you have any of these on your route, they're pretty good salt systems. It's just that they're not marketed widely anymore since Florida took over the company, because they're kind of pushing their salt cell, which is logical, and it's something that happens in business when one company buys another one and absorbs it, kind of like when Pentair purchased Pleatco. The reasons behind that, I don't really know exactly, but Pleatco is one of those things where they were really marketing themselves, and they don't market as much anymore since Pentair purchased them. And then back east in Florida, the AutoPilot salt system was really popular. Really few units here in Southern California, but I know over in Florida, in that part of the country, the AutoPilot systems were pretty popular. They're pretty solid as well. There's not a lot of problems. I guess the main problem that I've seen with those is a malfunctioning power board, which causes a low salt reading, kind of similar to the Hayward Aquarite system. What I'm kind of getting at here in this podcast is that there is really no perfect saltwater system out there for you. They're all going to have these little things that happen, either a manufacturing defect, known issues. I mentioned the flakes with the Pentair salt cell. That could be with any salt system. I've had Circuit Pool pools that have a lot of flaking, and I could probably do a separate podcast on that and what causes them and how to get rid of it. There's a couple things you can do to reduce the flaking that you see in the pool. These are like white skin-like flakes that are blown back in. I really would like to see like an after filter for this so that you can capture these flakes. That would be a cool product to have. But a lot of times it's a mystery of why it's doing this. There's a cool down period that you can initiate if you have a variable speed pump. So maybe run it at 1600 RPMs for an hour after the salt cell turns off to kind of cool down the cell, so it reduces that. Lowering the output seems to be the best solution. So if you're at 80% output, going to 30% output seems to reduce the flaking a lot. I have a trick that I use that I think is effective. I've gotten, certain people say that it's just kind of a placebo, but to me it works, and that's using a phosphate remover every week. The maintenance dose of that seems to help a lot with reducing the blowback from the saltwater system, or these flakes coming out. Usually it happens in the summer when it's really hot and the water is really warm and the flakes develop. Is it calcium? Is it because of the phosphates? Is it just the cell reversing and blowing these things out? It could be a combination of all of these things, but it is a problem with the salt systems to be aware of, that is an issue with just about every system across the board. But I find that the Pentair salt systems have the highest blowback or flakes that go back into the pool compared to the other systems. But the point is, there's no perfect system. They're all pretty good, and you just want to get the one best for you. I would rank it. The Jandy True Clear is probably a good purchase with very little problems. And then I would say the Pentair IntelliChlor or the CircuPool are probably tied for second as a good recommendation. And then the Hayward Aquarite would be the third one that I would recommend, with those other ones in front of it. But you can find out what the best salt system is in your area and purchase that one and do your research for sure. If you're looking for other podcasts I record, you can find those on my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. On the podcast icon, click on the banner, click on the podcast icon, and there'll be a drop-down menu of 1,600 podcasts for you to listen to there. And if you're interested in my coaching program, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.